Now, this is probably not as spectacular in terms of imagery as some of the ones we've seen. You know, Jim shows beautiful formations. I show pieces of burnt charcoal. And my co-author is Helm, who did some work on this before I came into the project. And I'm going to stick to my script if I can, so I will say what I need to say. Ever since the 2020 discovery of extensive Native American exploration in the paleo maze of Helm's Deep Cave, people have wondered who these explorers were and when they made their underground forays. While the first question is complex and will require much additional research, we can begin to answer the question, that is the second question, about site chronology. As the early visitors used river cane torch technology, there are significant deposits of associated charcoal scattered throughout the southern and central maze, as well as some associated torch stoke marks where the torches were hit against the wall. There's also a thin, rounded scatter of charcoal in the Jeffrey room, which we interpreted as a stationary fire or hearth. These charcoal deposits allow the radiocarbon dating of the indigenous activity in the cave. Since 2021, the authors have obtained 7 AMS, that is accelerator mass spectrometry assays from the cave, all of which are between 3,000 and 3,400 before present in conventional radiocarbon age. That is, they're from the late Archaic period. When calibrated, the possible dates range from the 13th to the 17th century BC. When placed in context with other eastern caves, the Helm's Deep Cave radiocarbon dates comport well with many other sites in Kentucky and Tennessee, confirming that, which George Crothers had already said, that late Archaic was a period of great activity in caves by native peoples. The presence of cane charcoal, along with other indicators like these stoke marks, is also key to documenting which passages were explored prehistorically, which it turns out were quite a lot. In fact, Native Americans explored as much cave passage in Helm's Deep Cave entrance than any other cave I can think of, from a single entrance in the United States. Jim said 5 or 6 miles at least. I think it's a little more than that. I think it will surpass Mammoth Cave, which the natives explored 10 miles in from the historic Mammoth entrance. Of course, Salts, they explored 8 miles. Big Bone, 8 miles. Third Unnamed Cave, Zarathustra, all you guys, 7 miles. And I believe Helm's Deep will eventually, native exploration will eventually surpass that. It will have to be documented, of course. Cane charcoal deposits are perhaps the most widespread archaeological features in the cave. They're more ubiquitous even than the footprints, the stoke marks, or the stone structures. The modern Helm's Deep cavers observed their presence early on in exploration. They saw their potential significance. In spring 2021, which is before I came onto the project, 2 cane charcoal samples from torch debris were submitted to direct AMS radiocarbon dating service for AMS radiocarbon dating by my co-author, Hal Love. This is sample number 1, obtained near survey station BEA 7, which is sort of in the initial maze, and sample number 2, which was collected near BKK 14, which is much further northeast from the cave entrance. In fact, this sample, BKK 14, is the most distant from the entrance that we've got a date on so far. The 2 samples are from well-preserved cane torch charcoal deposits. All the sample sites have since been flagged off. The conventional radiocarbon age for sample 1 is the one on the top here, 3297 plus or minus 27 years before present. Calibrated range at 2 sigma of 1618 to 1507 before present. The calibrated median date is 1565 BC, not before present, but BC. When you look at the calibration curve that shows how the data intersects the calibration curve using InCal 20, note that there are a lot of wiggles in that curve, so it makes exact precision impossible. But we have a pretty good idea about this. The second sample, which is the lower one here, yielded a convention radiocarbon age of 3,167 plus or minus 29, and again calibrated date ranges at 2 sigma of 1502 to 1397 BC or 1331. Because of the curve, it's not exact. The median, the calibrated median for sample 2 is 1445 BC. And again, here's the assay showing it looks pretty much like the other one, showing the intersection of the calibration curve with the data in the original assay. For passage context, this is what it looks like when you're at BKK 14 looking north into a side passage. In May 2021, 2 additional cane charcoal samples for radiocarbon dating were obtained during the initial assessment of the cave's archaeology by myself, Kristen Bobo, and Jim Honecker. These samples, number 3 and number 4, are both from cane charcoal floor deposits in the initial maze. They're debris from indigenous torches. Sample number 3, shown here, was collected in your survey station BKA2, and this is at the distal end of Hobbit Hall, which you'll hear more about later. It's a passage known for its human trackways. This is in the back. You can actually see the sample site way back in the back there. Sample number 4 was taken from the bone room near survey station BFD1, but it was not in direct association with the human remains in that room. After analysis by direct AMS, sample 3, which is the third one here, Hobbit Hall, showed, it's very similar. These dates are very similar, so slightly younger, a conventional radiocarbon age of 3027 plus or minus 22. And the calibration curve, again, just very similar. Sample number 4, to our surprise, was almost identical. It is statistically identical with a radiocarbon age of 3025 plus or minus 23, and again the 2 sigma, the calibrated range is from about 1330 BC to 1202, but then a median of about 1276. And again, it's really clearly cane charcoal. I can visually identify all of these. On our September 2021 cave art research trip, Professor Jan Schimmick suggested we sample and date the round scatter of charcoal in the Jeffrey room. This shows the dates we've already talked. This is the round scatter of charcoal in the Jeffrey room. Unlike all, and so with the assistance of Alan Kressler, I obtained a single sample, our sample number 5. Unlike all the other charcoal samples obtained from the cave, this one is too fine to visually identify as river cane as a remnant area. It might be, but it doesn't show the plant's column or stem. It doesn't show much of the plant's nodes and the inner nodes. You can't see those features in sample number 5. So for now, I actually list it as undifferentiated charcoal. Its context is also unique. It represents a stationary fire. So it's not debris from a torch that the Indians are carrying around. It's from a stationary fire there in that entrance room. It is in the first room encountered in the maze. And it is fairly close to, but not in direct association with human remains. More significantly, it is placed almost directly in front of the key passage that leads out of the maze into the cave entrance. So anyway, when we looked at the dates for this one, it's somewhere in the middle. Here's another view. You can see it's too fine to really visually identify. It's the one shown here, and it's in the middle. It's not as old as these. It's not as young as these. It's in the middle. Conventional radiocarbon age of 3093, and I'm not going to show you the calibration curves because they all pretty much look the same after this. In September 2022, a single sample of river cane charcoal from torch debris was collected from a flagged-off deposit on the cave floor near survey station BEG11. This is also an area with several human tracks. And the results are actually slightly older. It is the oldest result so far. And I had this sample done. It was subcontracted out to Penn State from Direct AMS, which is actually good for me to have more than one lab. Unfortunately, Direct AMS is closed, I think. And so we're going to have to pay more money now for this. Anyway, this is the oldest date for human exploration so far at Helm's Deep, and you can see the median is 1577 BC when it's calibrated. But these two are really not that different statistically; they're fairly similar. In February 2023, 2 additional samples of cane charcoal deposits were collected in Helm's Deep Cave. This is south of the cave entrance. We've only analyzed one of these so far. This is sample number 7, shown here, from a well-preserved torch debris deposit in a narrow crack in the cave floor near Survey Station B47B. This is a little south of the Midland Maze. The AMS radiocarbon assay was, well, you guessed it, it's identical with these other. These 3, in fact, these could be from the same trip. Statistically speaking, you cannot differentiate them at all. So a few observations about the radiometric results can be made. The assays represent several discrete episodes of exploration and visitation. That is, there's no overlap between the very oldest dates and then the third oldest date, and then from the very oldest date to the youngest. There's no overlap statistically. These are discrete events over a period of time. So you've got earlier, intermediate, and then younger. Individual means for all of them put together range from 1276 BC to 1577, and if you combine all the 2 sigmas, it extends it maybe over 400-year period instead of like a little over 300 years. But still, what we're talking about, it appears that multiple generations of men, women, and children, perhaps from a single group, visited and extensively explored the cave over a 300 to 400 year time frame in the late Archaic period. Now, if you think about what's going on regionally around 3,400 years before present, of course, the Poverty Point culture in Louisiana is still going strong, and there's some impact of that culture into southern and western Tennessee. The Shell Mound Archaic, of course, on the Green River and the lower Tennessee River is still sort of going on at 3,500 before Common Era. It's still persistent. So now the problem will be trying to tie the dates from Helm's Deep Cave and the people who explored it to this broader regional history. That's a challenging task that will require, well, more time and effort. Now, in terms of caves, this period, the late Archaic, was a time of increased underground activity by Native Americans across the region. This is a trend which, as we know, continued later into the early woodland period, after 3000 before present, although they had a different emphasis in the later period. So when we compare Helm's Deep with other cave sites with radiocarbon dates from the last 400 years of the late Archaic, you can see some of the commonalities, but it also reveals how the exploration, the prehistoric exploration of Helm's Deep was in some ways distinctive. Now, there are 10 sites older than these. That is, they're older than 3400 BP, but they're not shown here because they don't have any dates in this time frame we're looking at for Helm's Deep. So these are the 9 sites that I know about that are there, and you can just look very briefly at the third unnamed cave is perhaps the best comparison. But 3 of these, you'll note, have an earlier period of exploration 1,000 years before. So Wyandotte, there's exploration over 4,000 years ago, and then 1,000 years later, you see activity. Same true with third unnamed, same true with Mammoth. And so, but still, third unnamed, now, but something else that's distinctive, third unnamed, Native Americans continued to visit that, in the Mississippian period, in the woodland period, and even up into fairly recently. At Helm's Deep, Native American exploration stops. That is based on the evidence we have so far. These others, you may or may not be familiar with them, Skeleton Cave and Caney Hollow. The reason I put them, well, the dates overlap. These are the only 2 we know about, like Helm's Deep, where the only dates are from the late Archaic. But there are only 2 here and 1 from Caney Hollow, so that's not much data to go So, to summarize, at Helm's Deep Cave, indigenous exploration and visitation seems restricted to the last 400 years of the late Archaic. Whether the people moved, whether knowledge of the cave was lost, whether it became a taboo site, or if the key crawl into the maze was sealed, perhaps by natural processes, or perhaps by deliberate human activity, all that is still not known. When the first modern cavers, and they're here today, climbed up in the key crawl, the passage leading back to the main area, I believe it was passable but very, very low. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, just very low. That's what Haley said. And so it's now. When the gate was put in, some of that dirt had been removed because there was talk at one time about putting the gate there. But anyway, but still on the left wall, and that's shown here, there is this mud. And at one time there was more mud here. It's been dug out. But in that mud there are flecks of cane charcoal. So we might be able to get some insight into whether the dirt that was mostly but not totally sealing this passage was naturally deposited or human deposited. So anyway, the sediment plug, that is, needs to be further investigated. Now, native people in the late Archaic explored most of the southern maze and adjacent parts of sort of the south central maze. These are the more accessible parts of the cave from the current entrance. Additional radiocarbon dates will no doubt refine the site chronology. Of course, again, big questions need answering. Were these the people who lived in that area? Were they from further north on the Tennessee? Did they live down in the river and were just in the highlands seasonally? What exactly is going on there? And of course, what role did this cave have in their culture? And in general, what role did caves have in their cultures? There's no evidence of mining. The gypsum and selenite and other deposits are remarkable. Well, let me rephrase that. There's no evidence of extensive mining. There are a couple of spots where holes are dug, but if, having worked in Mammoth, if they were after the gypsum, it would be really evident. If they're after the anthodites, it would be really evident. Now, there's another cave in the county where we have a radiocarbon date from Native Americans exploring. And this is Lick Creek Cave, and the date I got out of here was about 2,500 years ago. So there are still Native Americans in the area. They're still exploring caves. But they're not going in Helm's Deep Cave for some reason. Oops. Sometimes the charcoal in the cave tells a different story. So this is one Howlett told me about. This isn't an area with no formations. So a Native American has harvested a small formation, was carrying it through the cave. This is the BK corridor for you who know the cave. It's the main way. And they either got tired of carrying it, or it fell out of their bag or their pouch. And of course, here it is, just deposited on top of River Cave. It's just weird, but really interesting. The cane, the charcoal, it's an interesting resource. There are some stoke marks, not as many as you would think. Apparently they stoked on the floor, the dirt or mud floor, a lot. We have lots of examples of cane, not as much as Mammoth. And you don't find the intact cane, it's all the charcoal. We haven't found gourds. It's a really rather narrow artifact. Now, as Jim said, it doesn't mean they explored everything in this box, but if we think about it, here's the entrance, and they explored many of these passages. It will take some young archaeologists to go in each one to get the exact total. And that's showing aerially, in terms of area, it's probably only a quarter of the cave. But I will point out it's an area that has pretty dense concentration of passages, especially up here in BP and all that area. Thank you very much.